Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Extra Shift. I'm Chris here, as always, with Brendan. How are we going?
Pretty good, pretty good. Welcome to episode 197. It is unfortunate timing because the 97 that everyone thinks of when we talk about 97 is currently injured. That's I don't know if we cursed him by doing this or something.
I kind of feel a little bit like it sort of sums up a large chunk of his career. When you're expecting big things to happen and him to be rewarded for them, it just doesn't happen. It sums up so much. I mean, there are also a lot of people right now who are screaming, but Jeremy Roenick's my 97. And hello to those Trump fans out there. But outside of that, I mean, obviously Joe Thornton once had 97, which has to be a troll.
It was just briefly during that first season, I think, in
that
Toronto,
weird Toronto run that no one,
but
still not retired, by the way. He's still not retired.
Still not, no. Yeah, there's a few people that are just like technically not retired, could come back, but unfortunate timing for the Oilers as they haven't really had good goaltending, shockingly, to begin the season.
They've not had a lot. We'll talk about the Oilers in a little bit because as you know, one of my favorite hobbies is to lay into the Oilers, and they've given me so much to work with for the start of this season. Also, for anyone who happens to tune in and watch live, I know, unfortunate timing today on the live, but literally our schedules this week mean that this lunchtime on a Wednesday is the only time in the week we've got to do this.
Yeah, so pretty much. I'm busy really pretty much every night for a little bit.
Go 3 weeks. We can't really go 3 weeks into the season without doing an episode. We will be back to more regular service shortly, though. So let's get into it because obviously 197 we mentioned McDavid. We'll start with the signings and we'll start with the news rundown before we talk about the season and what the hell's going on. Also, we know there are a lot of people, if they're watching live, have also probably got another screen open with the Frozen Frenzy up. Seems to be going quite well so far. Again, anyone who watches NFL Red Zone, you've seen this format before. They even had Scott on Frozen Frenzy before talking about, what sort of job it is. And then obviously Sportsnet did it as well with ice surfing. So not something we've not seen before. They're doing so far, I think, a pretty good job. So
yeah, it's been an interesting season so far in terms of scheduling because today we've seen another day of all 32 teams playing at the same time.
Great for fantasy.
Yeah, with staggered, it is unfortunate that no matter who you choose to bench today, there will be the one that scores a goal. It's happened to me a couple of times already.
Why didn't it happen last week when I was playing you?
not in that league, but
Brendan
that is. I mean, you were leading for the first couple of days,
and then you caught me.
Then I caught up. But look, it's an interesting thing that they've kind of had pressure put on them by the networks to do this kind of day where you can run through and you can watch a bunch of games that are actually not all starting exactly at the same time with intermissions all at exactly the same time. So there's kind of like these 15-minute blocks of staggered starting times today for all of those games, which is a godsend, at least if you're switching around channels and trying to watch a bunch of games, even for fans of teams that unfortunately actually have like media blackouts and stuff for their own games in their own markets and stuff. At least you can switch around and you're not having 4 games start at the same time and all of their intermissions being on exactly the same time.
And again, if you're watching if you really just sort of want to watch all of them at once, you watch the Frozen Frenzy, program where you've got John Bookgross and Kevin Weeks hosting in the studio, and then they've got their panel, all the panels are linking as well. And it's a really good way to sort of keep across all of the different games as they're sort of happening at the moment. Like right now they're showing I've got it on in the background, they've got the Boston-Chicago game going on at the moment, which is at this point 1-0 in the second to Boston. But yeah, I think it's a really good idea. I like it. Obviously it's a bit of a problem in terms of, again, fantasy hockey owners hate it with a fiery passion.
Well, I think the bigger problem is just the balancing of all of this because, yesterday we have all 32 teams playing. Yesterday we only had one game. Tomorrow we only have one game.
Yep.
And then the rest of the week is a little bit more normal.
It works for the NFL because you play once a week.
Yeah.
So like Red Zone works because you play once a week and that's it. For the NHL, it's a lot harder to do something like this consistently. So I think it's 3 times this season they're doing it. So anyway, let's get into some of the signings. So Zegras, literally the night we recorded the last episode.
yeah, several hours after we hit post.
3 years at 5.75 million for Zegras, and also Drysdale 3 years at 2.3 million. The Zegras one's really it's an interesting. I don't hate the deal. I think he's still. I think from memory, this was where there were a few people who were upset about it at the time, and I went, yeah, but he's still an RFA at the end of that. So you're not walking Zegras into his free agency. He's still an RFA. So, yes, he will probably by that point be able to ask for a lot more. But if you're the Ducks, you hope he's in a position to ask for more.
Yeah.
Like, I like that deal. I think it's a good deal. The Ducks have got the money to spend at the moment.
Yeah, it's a very cheap deal for the Ducks, realistically. It's only just the we've seen a lot of teams locking their players up for 8 years. Some of them we'll talk about very shortly, off their first contract. The Ducks have decided to go the more traditional bridge route here, and we'll see how that works out for them long term. It's interesting to me because I would have thought that the Ducks would have been a team that would have been interested in locking up that long-term deal because of how much cap space they have. They've got a little bit to spend.
I don't think that Zegras wanted the deal. I don't think it's so much that the Ducks weren't going to lock him in. I think Zegras is like the cap's about to go through the roof.
Yeah.
And by 3 years' time, like next year we're going to get a big jump, but then we're expecting to get jumps consistently. Zegras is gambling on the cap going through the roof and him being in his prime right as the cap takes off.
Yeah, I imagine that's probably a big part of why this deal took so long and why it went into the season. But it'd be interesting to see how it pans out there. I was still expecting him to get more than that, so I think it's a very cheap deal for the Ducks.
Yeah, I think the Ducks have done a really good job, and I think he's taking a gamble on, I'll take a little bit less now, but we're going to make this up in the next one. Yeah. And the Drysdale one's perfectly fine. It's a nice little deal. Again, sort of moves them in the same direction. They're clearly moving everybody in the same time frame here, which could backfire. But I think at the moment they've got the cap space, and they're not showing any point in time soon where that's going to be an issue for them. So, Rasmus Dahlin, 8 years at 11 million re-signing with the Sabres. I have absolutely no problem with this deal whatsoever. I think that look, there are a lot of people who remember Dahlin immediately after his drafting when Buffalo were absolutely terrible, and remember that he didn't necessarily play brilliantly early on, and what a bust. If you've seen Rasmus Dahlin in the last 18 months, he's worth that contract.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it does make him one of I think the third highest paid defenseman in the league, I think behind Carlson and Doughty. Again, obviously we know cap's going up, all that kind of thing. And he's really come into his own. Yeah, he's really come into his own in the last year or so.
And the age profile that Dahlin is as well, like that sits beautifully. Like it's 11 million. And again, the only two more heavily paid, you said, are Doughty and Carlson. But Dahlin, you're paying for prime years, whereas with the other two, you're paying for what they've done.
Yeah, it's interesting too. This leads into the next one. They also locked up Owen Power for 7 years at 8.35. I think that the Sabres really have, taken a very similar track to what we just saw the Senators do recently in terms of locking up all of their young guys long term and kind of going, this is our core. We're betting the bank on this. This is who the nucleus of our team is going to be for the next 5 to 8 years, and we're going to ride with this. Whether or not any of those players turn out not to be the guy that they think that they are, over development or whatever. Obviously, there's a risk there. There's a gamble there. But I don't know. I think it makes sense in a lot of ways. I think it's not so different to some of the cores of the past. You look at like the Penguins, the Blackhawks, all of these teams or whatever that it all succeeded for, that they locked up their young talented players to long-term deals. Back then you could do it for a lot longer than 8 years. So in a lot of ways it's probably less risk than some of those.
There's a lot of conversation about the fact that Power obviously is a bit of a gamble. I don't see it as a massive gamble. And again, the 8.35 with the new cap, the way it's going to be, 8.35 is going to be fairly movable should it become a problem. I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think what they've done is lock up what is going to be a very good player for a very cheap rate.
Yeah,
So,
no one's really getting real great bargains on young players anymore. It seems to be swinging away from that, which I think is probably for the best.
Then we come to the two most intriguing deals, because we talked about both of these individuals in the last podcast.
Yes.
Connor Hellebuck and Mark Scheifele. So Hellebuck, 7 years, 8.5. Scheifele, 7 years, 8.5. That's a statement. I'm interested. I'm intrigued. I don't understand this decision from Hellebuck's perspective, because unless they've been able to sell the idea that the Jets are about to become this all-conquering mammoth, and I don't believe they are. I think that they're in massive issues going forward. We talked about this in the last episode.
Yeah.
How are you going to convince players to come to Winnipeg? Well, I think they're arguing that, well, we lock up those two and go, well, don't you want to come and play with these guys? I'm not sure why. I don't know why he took that deal. I don't understand it from his perspective. Not from them. From them, I get it. They want to get anyone who would like to stay in Winnipeg with a bit of a name. They will lock them up to whatever long-term contract they will take. But I just find it really like the Hellebuck one is a no move. And it's a complete no move. So unless the only reason that he signed it was that in the eventuality of moving him, he wants to have complete control over where he ends up.
I think that that's probably part of it. I suspect that this is like, well, I wasn't going to get a better money deal than this anywhere. If he hit free agency next year, he wasn't likely going to sign anywhere for more than this. So he was willing to just kind of take that, and then if things go bad over the next year or so, force his way out of town. But
although the question is, who's trading for an $8.5 million Hellebuck?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Who can afford to do that? I don't know. That's a very difficult deal to make, especially with goalies. There's such limited positions. We haven't ever seen the big kind of deals for goalies that people try to point to as potential options. It's a pretty rare thing to see.
Honestly, the only club I can think of who might do that is someone like a Montreal, who might decide that they want to replace.
Yeah, this is our. We've decided we're going into a window or whatever. We're going to pay.
We've done this before. This before. We'll do it again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm interested by that. I'm the Scheifele re-signing is an interesting one too. I mean, there were lots of conversations that he was basically out the door, and suddenly he's back for 7 years with a no move. It's again unexpected.
Yeah.
From Winnipeg, I get it from both of their perspectives. Interesting. And look, we'll see what Winnipeg are going forward. And, I think they're trying to gamble that they can lure people to Winnipeg on the basis of, well, we've kept Hellebuck and we've kept Scheifele, so would you like to come play with these guys? I don't know how much of a draw that is over the idea of you're going to be playing in Manitoba.
No, I mean, it's a difficult thing, I guess, if you're the one trying to make these decisions on the future of the Winnipeg Jets, that if you can't retain these guys, that's pretty much committing right then to a rebuild.
And the other issue we know is that Cheveldayoff is not a big fan of trades. He doesn't like them. He doesn't make a lot of them. Remember, it wasn't 4 years until he made his first one.
Yeah.
Like he just for forever just refused to trade anybody. The Jets are a weird proposition going forward, just how you rebuild that team. They don't think it's a rebuild. It's a rebuild. But I don't know how you rebuild that team unless you've got draft stock. And they don't really even have draft stock. So
no, they're kind of just going to stick around that mushy middle again for a long time until those players age out, I think.
They're hoping to St. Louis Blues it. Devon Tays, 7 years at 7.25 with the Abs. That's a good extension for I think both parties. Devon Tays gave them that sort of 1-2 punch there on the back end with McCarr. That's a good value for what is basically the second best defenseman on the team.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, certainly, if you want to compare, obviously the age brackets aren't the same or whatever, but if you want to compare the impact of like, an Owen Power and a Devon Taves and so forth, like, I'll take that Taves deal.
Oh, 100%. And Shane Pinto is unsigned.
Yeah, still. I mean, and it's not because he's, not worth the money or anything. The Sens just don't have any money.
The Ottawa Senators have $42,000 in cap space.
Yeah.
You know what? Winning the off-season has its drawbacks. And
it's almost like if they hadn't paid like Korpisalo and Forsberg to be a bad tandem for them, then they could have afforded to re-sign their young players.
It's unreal what they've done. Like, how do you and again, everyone talks about what a rebuild is like. They've taken the punt on Vladimir Tarasenko, $5 million at 1 year. What's the problem? Shane Pinto, that's your problem.
It's interesting because Tarasenko has been great for them so far, but at the same time, I don't know how they resolve this situation. I don't know how they free up the space to be able to re-sign their RFA.
Like, this is the problem. They've got like Stutzler and Norris are re-signed until the end of time. Good contracts, by the way. That's not a bad thing. Obviously, Brady Tkachuk is Brady Tkachuk. Giroux has a no move. Tarasenko's 1 year is a no trade. Drake Batherson, everyone's favorite character from Days of Our Lives, $5 million for Drake Batherson. But again, fine. The rest of them, though, where is? You look at their money and you're like, where is your money going?
Yeah, I mean, and it's not going to get any better for them next year when that Sanderson contract kicks in and he goes from being 1 million to 8 million.
8 million.
And that immediately takes up all of the cap space that
all the extra cap
from the people coming off their roster. So they're going to be in exactly the same spot next year. Again, it's not like they can just go, we're just for some reason not going to play Shane Pinto at all this year and then sign him next year or something. Like it doesn't work then either.
There was a bit of a conversation in the off season around the sale of the Senators, and a large part of that conversation has been that they were going to possibly move Pierre Dorion out. And all these people are like, no, you can't move Pierre Dorion. He's finally getting a chance to. And look at what he's done in the last couple of offs. I feel like if this doesn't stick for the Sens, and I don't think it will, I feel like, they've just brought in somebody who's friends with the owner to be high up in hockey operations. That was the person that Dangle said he'd heard was going to be the GM of the Sens. So it feels like they've got the GM in the room. And Dorion's probably got to make this stick for the benefit of, his job. He somehow needs to find some cap space here. I don't know where he's going to find it, but he's got to find some cap space from somewhere. So let's get into the first big story of the last couple of weeks, which is the Pride tape. So the NHL banned Pride tape because, of course, they did, and then today reversed it. Now everyone was waiting to see who was going to be the first person to use it. Brian Burke had already come out and said straight up, any player that is fined for using Pride tape, I will pay your fine. Everyone pointed out that coloured tape is literally in the rule book.
Yeah.
So you can't ban players from using coloured tape on their sticks because it's in the rules. So we were waiting to see who was going to challenge it. Everyone's like, which big name player will do it? And the answer is Travis Dermott.
Well, we did see at least a few big name players, notably Connor McDavid talking about how it was shit. Like basically, it was nice at least to get some.
McCarr said it was shit. McDavid said it was shit. Matthews basically said it was shit without using the words "it's shit."
Yeah.
And then you kind of, everyone was waiting to see who was going to use it. The manufacturers of Pride tape had said that there were players that had already put orders in, and
a bunch of teams put in like additional orders and just bought a bunch of it, started using it on a bunch of stuff like around their dressing rooms and things. But it's Travis Dermott had previously used it on his the handle of his stick for a long time.
Dermott's been a very active ally, an incredibly active ally.
So I think that made a lot of sense or whatever. And the interesting thing was, basically the first game that he played with it, all of a sudden it was like okay, well, now the ball's in the NHL's court. What are you going to do about it? Now that someone has broken your rules, how are you going to respond to it? And then just crickets. The days go by, a few days pass, and it's just like, well, there's been no decision on this yet. There's been no fine levied. I think that, really, I think what he did was just called their bluff and just went, all right, fine me. Let's see how this works out for you. Because that the backlash from fining a player for doing this was just going to make this a way bigger deal than it would have been in the first place. No one would have noticed if they didn't do this.
Yeah, like we all, like the Pride Night issue is a big problem, obviously. But like the taking it out on things like Pride Tape is stupid. Like, absolutely. Look, we all know the NHL screwed up massively on the Pride Week issue last year. That became a big problem. And obviously they've got some things they've got to work out with anything like that going forward. But Pride Tape is a really dumb hill to die on. Really dumb hill to die on. And the other interesting point that people pointed out was that on every other post that Travis Dermott has ever put out there about pride, inclusivity, and supporting LGBT rights, the NHL has supported it. They've liked the post. They've commented on the post with love hearts and rainbows and all. And they're like, hang on a minute. So he basically did it quietly and just was like, okay, well, see what you're going to do with that.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing before.
Yeah, and as you said, everything went very quiet. And then basically, I think the NHLPA turned around to the league and went, well, colour tape's in your rules. What are you going to do? Bring it on. And I think the NHL just went, yeah, we overreached. Let's not.
It's funny because they really shot themselves in the foot with this one, in that if they hadn't done anything, like if they just left it alone, they'd already banned all, warm-up jerseys, all of that kind of stuff. The bar
except for all the military night jerseys, which are going to be allowed this year. They're all
of course, because apparently that's not political.
No.
The bar was already set so low, and there were so few players that actually ever used this tape anywhere except warm-ups.
Yeah.
That it was never going to be an issue for them anyway. Basically, Travis Dermott would have continued to use the little bit of tape on his handle, and nobody else would have said shit, and they could have just avoided this whole problem. Instead, they just made it way worse themselves by being the biggest tone-deaf league in the world, and just caused the situation for themselves.
It's one of the statements that I know Dangle makes a lot, that he's right. Hockey will be a great sport once it's finished. And like the league frequently puts its foot in it. Like, and this is when they talk about, why isn't the league getting bigger, or why isn't the league growing? The biggest impediment to hockey is hockey. It can't get out of its own way. It does that wherever you look. Hockey is the number one. They go, oh, there's other sports. No, the other sports don't care. Like the NBA and the NFL don't take shots at each other. They're like, no, there's plenty of money to go around, and sports fans are sports fans. We don't care.
They don't have the inferiority complex that NHL,
the
as
NHL,
a league and NHL players have, where they've got to, not players, fans have, that they've got to point at other leagues and go, oh, hockey's better than them.
We've got to justify our sport. No, you don't. You don't have to justify.
Please like our sport. We're
please,
better.
Why does nobody else like our sport? Look, they hit really hard. Who cares? All right, let's go to let's go to Canada. Let's go to Montreal. They're having a bad time in Montreal.
Oh, an absolute injury award this season so far.
The Kirby Dark season's already over. ACL and MCL on the right knee, and he's done.
That's tough. I mean, so I think that that they've also just today had like some more bad news that I don't know. Some people I think are reading into the indefinite term as meaning definitely the whole season, but I don't know that that's necessarily the case for all of their injuries. But still, I mean, look, the Habs weren't lined up to have an incredible season in the first place, but I think
Savard is out for 6 to 8 weeks due to a fracture in the left hand.
Yeah. So look, I think they were already going to have a tough time of it. It certainly hasn't helped. It's unfortunate for Kirby Duck that he's already lost so much time in his career with injuries and with not really kind of being able to live up to the potential hype that he had at certain points in his career. Having a year off certainly is probably going to set that back again.
And look, I mean, the Habs. The thing for the Habs as well is that, like, there's this really weird sort of the cult around the Habs is, they're going to be great again. They're going to be great again. No, they're not. They're not going to be great this year, right? They're going to be a bottom 6-ish team, right? That's where they're going to sit. This will definitely put them down there. This Savard being out for 6 to 8 weeks, that'll definitely mean. And some people go, well, they've won 2 in a row since then. Well, yes, they have, but we're very early in the season. Like, there are a lot of mirages going on in the table very early on. Like, Boston are for me the biggest one, because Boston, yes, they've got 5 games played, 5 games won, and they're going to win today. But when you look at who Boston have actually played so far in the season, none of them are a real team. They've played the Blackhawks twice. They've played.
Some teams have had a gauntlet, and some teams have played.
Yeah, some teams have had an absolute cakewalk through it. So, I think that the Habs weren't going to challenge much this year, but it's still, for him, this is a massive setback. This was going to be the season where he was going to be getting a huge chunk of game time and a lot of responsibility and the chance to grow into that role a bit more. So, I feel really bad for him, but, this might be something where it sort of inspires the Habs to have a bit more of a think earlier on about who they're going to look for trading partners for. In terms of with some of their roster, because their aim before the deadline should be to stock up on as many picks as humanly possible, just to get that rebuild really kickstarted heavily. Rasmus Anderson, 4 games for elbowing Patrick Laine in the final minutes of a game that they were losing.
Like, literally in the last 5 seconds.
It was stupid.
Yeah.
It was over. It was well and truly over.
Laine was taking a shot on the empty net and just got sideswiped by.
And look, like the Flames have been terrible. Like, they've not been good. And the funny part about this one is the appeals process, because again, when we talk about the NHL and what the NHL is or is not, under 6 games, you don't go to a panel. You just go to Gary.
Yeah, I don't think that historically Gary has ever overturned any suspension, because it's his employees that are giving out these suspensions. It's like, you're going to go to the boss and he's going to go, am I going to sell out the guys that I put in charge of this for the benefit of this player? Absolutely not. I'm just going to uphold whatever they said.
Exactly. There was not a hope in hell he was ever getting off that one. Like, it was never going to happen. Also, he shouldn't have, because it was just really dumb. Like, forget the idea of was it brutal, it was just stupid.
Yeah, and caused an injury too, which we know probably shouldn't be part of the formula for whether or not you get suspended, whether or not the player came out of it injured. But that was the
it definitely is part of it.
Yeah,
it shouldn't be, but it definitely.
No, I mean, like, obviously, I feel like intent is somewhat more important than the result, injury. But
well, that's the thing too, is that the issue should be, was it intentional, or was there an intent to injure, or was it an intent?
Because sometimes you just get away with something really dangerous because someone doesn't get injured.
Yeah, exactly. Was there? Well, there was no injury on the play, so play it on. No, he tried.
He tried to stab him, but he missed, so therefore it's okay.
It feels half like the Sideshow Bob defensive, attempted murder. Really, do they give it a Nobel Prize for attempted chemistry? It's, that sort of level of defense of I know he tried to elbow him in the face, but he didn't quite connect really hard, so let it go. No, he tried to injure somebody. Don't worry about, was he injured? Did he try to do it? Yes. Go. All right. The Ducks, the lovely Ducks, who are currently in a life or death scrap with the San Jose Sharks, are only playing Leo Carlson 2 games a week for the first 2 months of the season.
This is a weird one, because they called him up. He got to play his first game of the season, scored a goal, and then immediately after that they went, "Oh no, we're just sitting him. He's just going to be a healthy scratch for the next couple of games." And what? Why?
It's an interesting. We don't want to burn him out too much. I feel like this is the Ducks going, we need to put ourselves in the right position in the table.
Yeah. I mean, is the strength and conditioning program called tanking? Is my question.
The strength and conditioning program that Leo Carlson is on right now is, we need less points than San Jose. Yeah. And San Jose are playing their youngsters. They're playing because we don't have anyone else. So like Eklund and Bordelot and all of those guys are playing. And the problem with playing those guys is they're trying to impress everybody and show everybody how good they are. And they don't quite understand the concept of we don't need points, gentlemen. So there's that really fine line they've got to walk between we don't need points, but also if you don't impress, you're out. So they've got this really fine line to walk. So if you just don't play him for the first half of the season, he can be as impressive as you want in the second half of the season. And
when the points don't matter to us because we're already out of the picture.
Yeah, we're already so far out, it's ridiculous. We can trade a bunch of people, then you can come in and just do whatever you want. It's like when I said, like last year when William Eklund won Player of the Year for San Jose, well, Rookie of the Year last year for San Jose, despite the fact he basically didn't play half the season.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, but then he was really good for the little bit at the end when they brought him in. Someone at the other end of his career, Ovi. First goal of the season in the 5th game of the season.
Yeah, so I was writing this up earlier, and at that point in time, he hadn't scored a goal. He'd played 4 games, hadn't scored a goal, had 2 assists because the Caps in general just hadn't really scored at all this year. But he did score today. He scored on his 13 out of 14 shots in this game. He's kind of making up for lost time a little bit, considering that he was held without a shot on goal for 2 consecutive games for the first time in his entire 13-14 year career. He had 5 or 4 in his other 2 games, but that's a shocker. I mean, look, I suspect that he will still kind of, with just the time that they're playing Ovi, he's played both power plays for a long period of time, and it really feels like the entire Caps season is just a shell game for getting Ovi, the goal record at this point in time. They, they're just, everything is going to him. So he had 14 shots in this game. The next closest Capital had 3. A whole bunch of them, down to 3. It's basically just pass over the puck and let him shoot it at this point.
And the other thing is too with that, to sort of point it out as well, it was his 13th shot. They scored early. It's they literally
it was his 13th shot in 2 periods.
Yeah, this was the thing. In 2 periods, they just basically every time they got the puck, Ovi, bang, Ovi, bang. That's all they did. It was literally because it was very very early on, and I think it was 1-1 at one point in that game, and then the Leafs went okay and went and scored a bunch of goals. But yeah, it's just that was a fairly early on that he had 13 shots. All they're doing, it's the only plan they have. It's going to be a long season if you're.
And once he scored that one, they kind of just gave up. They kind of just went, all right, we're done for today. We've got him one. All right, that's it. Pack it in, boys.
He got his goal. What more does he need to be doing? Look, there are certain teams that are in this season. Every team has a purpose in this season. Some teams are trying to win. Some teams are trying to lose. And some teams have just got one player on the ice and they're just going to give him the puck the whole year.
Yeah.
This is it. He's just going to do this. So
Bedard is that player for Chicago.
I was watching before, and there was a moment where Bedard skated into the zone against Boston, and 4 Bruins straight in, straight in. Everyone's waiting and watching and waiting and watching, and the puck goes to Bedard, and they just all go clonk.
Yeah.
Now the top 100 players list came out. Now Brendan's not salty at all, but.
Honestly, at this point in time, it's just funny. I feel like they're just trolling him. I actually didn't care that much at the time because it just went okay, all right, that's typical.
But it's before you get into that, it's like when they released NHL did their top 100 players of all time list.
Yeah.
And Joe Thornton got nowhere near it. But
that was the same list that Ovi that Malkin was excluded from the first time. So it was this big joke, Mr. 101. At that point in time, all of these players got included that. Right now you would look back and go, what the fuck? Why was that guy ever in there? And at the time there were players in there that's just what, this guy?
Well, I remember we had the debate at the time because, TES made it in. And it was but look at all the cups. I was like, yeah, but we're looking at the player.
Yeah, but there were a handful of. I mean, like the thing is with the 100 of all time thing, there was a whole bunch of players from like the 70s and 80s and stuff in there, which took up a bunch of the the slots anyway. So it was never going to be every great player of the current era or anything. But just on resume alone, like there were 3 or 4 guys in there. I don't remember. This was a few years ago. I don't remember all the players at this point in time. That it was it became this big kind of thorn in.
Well, Malcolm and Thornton were the 2 that really stood out.
Yeah. Those 2 were, obviously, first ballot Hall of Famers that weren't included and was ridiculous. This list at least was this year. Like it's supposed to be the top 100 players of this year. And I would understand if like Malkin had been bad recently, but he had like another point per game season last year. He started this season hot for the first like couple of games. He was like leading the NHL in scoring. He still has like 8 points in over the games that he's played. It's like coming in today was tied for 9th in league scoring. And the players that they put in the list above him instead of him is just a fucking slap in the face.
There's one in particular in that list that there's 2 in particular on that list that I find deeply insulting to you. I find the JT Miller and Nazem Kadri, that is deeply insulting. Like Kadri last year was not good.
Yeah.
Like, and JT Miller, like everyone spent the entire season trying to move him because no one wanted him.
Yeah, everyone was complaining about how bad he was.
Yeah, like again, like Hurdle. Look, I'm a homer. Someone has to be good on the Sharks. I wouldn't put him above Malcolm.
Ryan O'Reilly, who was a 4th liner on Toronto last year.
He was a fourth liner in there, and there to be a bit of a experienced head. Bo Horvat, Troy Terry, Tyler Toffoli, Alex Tuck, I can see.
Alex Tuck only had 1 good season last year.
Yeah,
like he's only been over a point per game. Like before last year, his his highest points scored in a season was 52.
Look, this is
who you're putting over a first ballot Hall of Famer.
I can allow for some recency bias in.
Well, I mean, it is obviously supposed to be for this season, so I can forgive the fact that he's like a multiple Art Ross winner, constant, all that kind of okay. You can look at that and go, all right, this is in the past. Like, okay, fair enough or whatever. But if you're looking at current impact,
I think Malkin's still. The thing is, you can take recency bias into account for someone like Tuck, for example, but the others don't justify being in over Malkin. Even recency bias.
A handful of these players had terrible seasons last year, and Malkin didn't. Malkin was still over a point per game.
Hurdle wasn't brilliant. I loved Thomas Hurdle, but Hurdle wasn't brilliant.
Most of the players on that list had bad seasons last year.
Senators had 1 player who was decent last year. He's playing in Pittsburgh, but that's the thing. Like that was it.
Carlson made the list. Carlson was like middle of the list somewhere.
You know how we said before about the idea that this year that the Capitals had just passed the puck to Ovi and shoot. That's what San Jose was last year with Erik Karlsson. It was just give the puck to Eric. We don't care what happens with the rest. Just give the puck to Eric. Nobody.
I like at least that like they got a bunch of quotes from players around the league about the snub, and mostly from the Penguins and stuff. And I like that they just didn't hold back. Like they just interviewed a bunch of guys like Ryan Graves, who's just like, this is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever seen. Like I would never read this. Like this is dumb as shit. Look, that's nice to see at least that people realize how stupid that was.
So before we get into sort of the last part that I want to talk about, just sort of start with our general views on the season so far, what we've seen, how teams are traveling, how teams are going. For example, at the moment, like just to give everyone an update where we're at the moment, this will timestamp the whole thing. The Red Wings have just scored 3 goals on the power play, on 3 different power plays in the period to go 4-3 up over the Kraken in one period. So like the Red Wing power play has gone mental. In the game at the moment, so they're the
DeBrincat-Larkin connection has been really good so far for the Red Wings.
DeBrincat's playing. DeBrincat looks like he's going to be really good in Detroit. So
I think that's made a big change to what we were talking about coming into the season about their potential. It didn't seem like they had the greatest depth, and they probably still don't realistically. It drops off very quickly after that top line, but right now. Obviously Alex Trinket isn't going to continue to shoot 40%. That's probably not going to be sustainable. Obviously not going to be sustainable, but overall, that as a team, they've got a lot of mojo going right now. That's for sure.
So I think to sort of go in, what I think we can do is just quickly. I'll just have a look division by division. So with the Atlantic, which we'll start with, Boston are obviously 5-0, and they're about to go to 6-0 because they're playing the Blackhawks. But what I want to point out for all these people going, oh, you wrote off the Bruins at your own expense. The Bruins games so far this year have been, and I quote directly here, Blackhawks, Predators, Sharks, Kings, Ducks, Blackhawks.
So the best team there is the Kings?
The Kings are the only team that's vaguely a team.
That's vaguely like a playoff team, potentially.
Like the Blackhawks are horrible. The Preds are meh. And the Sharks are the worst team in hockey. And the Ducks are the second worst team in hockey. So, and the Blackhawks are probably the third worst team in hockey, and that's only because Connor Bedard is brilliant. So, the Bruins are 5-0 because they've not played a team. And coming up, they've got the Ducks again. Then they go Red Wings, Panthers, Leafs, Red Wings, Stars. So they start playing teams after that. But the Bruins have an absolute soft opening to the season. So I don't think we can take. The other thing is too, they've had that soft opening to the season. They've scored 16, and they've got 7 against. They're not winning games big, they're just getting over the line with 1 and 2 goal games. So
we've seen this many times before. Obviously, we don't need to have a caveat that 5 games is a very small sample size for any team.
If you look at the rest of that division, there, I think it's all a bit of a muddle at the moment. The Buffalo had a really slow start, but they're starting to vaguely remember what they're supposed to be doing. Toronto's been weird because Toronto, they couldn't win a game for the first part unless Matthews scored a hat trick. They've not looked great. Their defense is terrible. Their depth is not good at all. Their goaltending is an absolute nightmare at the moment. Samsonov has not had a good start to the season, and they're relying on Wall to be brilliant. Isn't it really funny? The Leafs fans have started to complain about the fact that the depth they've got on their third and fourth lines is not great. And it's almost like they signed a bunch of players who probably shouldn't do that. Also, there's been a bunch of people who are talking about the Leafs who have suddenly realized that, Max Domi's not his father and that he's a skill player, not a thug.
But Ryan Reeves is going to turn the whole season around, Chris.
That's grit. He's keeping the fires off. The first
he fought one guy, so therefore,
he fought 2, one in the first 2 games each.
Yeah.
And as I pointed out to people, that didn't mean he was keeping the flies off. He challenged somebody, and they instantly turned around and fought him. So he's not keeping the flies off. And then in the game where they played Florida and got the ever-loving shit beaten out of them, he did nothing. After all of his talk in the off-season about if I was there when Gudis was being Gudis, that wouldn't have happened. And then he let it happen in front of him.
But every professional hockey player in the league is terrified of him, Chris.
They're scared of Ryan Reeves.
That's what I've done.
The Metro. Now, as we all expected, the Flyers are leading in the Metro.
Yeah, the Metro has been a bit of a mess so far.
The Flyers,
honestly, no
the
one's
Flyers
been
did this
great.
last year. The Flyers did this last year.
The Flyers do this more or less every year. They win 10 games in a row, and then they lose 10 games.
And then they don't win games again.
Yeah, and then they never win games again.
It's a bit of it's a muddle at the moment. The Penguins,
I mean, it has been nice to see the Flyers have gotten Sean Couturier back after not playing for pretty much 18 months, and it looks like it's funny, but Couturier won the Selke, then got injured, and then didn't play for 2 years, and he's back and looks like he's probably not going to win the Selke again or anything, but he's. He's actually kind of, back, doesn't look like he's lost too much of a step, and is, a big difference maker for them. So that'll be nice for them.
Couturier has been good.
Obviously, there's still a bit of a mirage going on there. I don't think that they're going to continue to be a playoff team.
No. I think, as I said, I think there's the Hurricanes are mid-pack at the moment. And, the Pens are obviously had a bit of a slow burn, and
I mean, they replaced half of their team. I'm not surprised. They've still got changes to make there, and
no one's breaking any win records this year. That's not happening. No. Then we go to the West, where we've got the Central and the Pacific both have teams who are undefeated at the top of their divisions. The Avs 6-0. Well, they've just won again, so they just finished off their game there with an empty net goal. The Stars and the Avs, and then the Coyotes.
Yeah.
Arizona, and it's not. They've looked good. That's been the scary part.
And Vemelka's been good too. Vemelka's been putting up like a 950 or something so far. That's probably not going to last, but they've got some mojo. They've got that coming out of Australia. They're still rolling.
Exactly, the Australian effect. Let's call it the Australian.
They've got the Australian bomb. That's a real thing.
It's definitely what's happening right now. It's 100% the Australian effect. At the moment, you've got Winnipeg and St. Louis, by the way, are both currently playing in the game of who's more mid. The Jets are currently winning that 1-2-1. And the Pacific. So the Canucks have been probably the story of the Pacific so far in terms of a positive story because they've played really well to start off. I think the biggest story in the Pacific so far, it's the Oilers. And I know McDavid's now out for a week and a half, 2 weeks injured. They have looked horrible.
Yeah.
And it's not just the fact that defense is terrible. And what I also loved with the overreaction that you get from Oilers media is Jack Campbell had one game where he stood on his head and everyone's like, they're back! And the next game got pulled after the end of the first. Their defense is absolutely abysmal. Darnell Nurse is having one of the worst starts to a season I've seen a defenseman have. He's just been abject. And it's not been good. And then they've got no depth at all. There is no depth on that team. And they're surprised that they're not getting any performance out of players that will not perform. Also, what we're seeing a little bit of at the moment, I think that I've said a lot to Oilers fans. You get that phase with Evander Kane where you'll get a really good first 12 months, maybe a good 18 months, and then Evander Kane just stops. And then you'll start seeing problems that will occur. Now, we haven't seen problems yet.
Well, I mean, potentially. We're starting to see him. He's lost a bunch of ice time. He's been playing down on the third line. Yep. He had some kind of cryptic message, talking to the media, which he was probably joking about him trying to pick a fight so he could get thrown out of the game because he didn't want to be there. It sounds like the honeymoon period is probably over for him.
And this is what happens everywhere he goes, is you get 12 to 18 months of, oh, look, he's really good. And then it just sort of ends and he gets bored and just seems to be his own biggest enemy and turns into what Evander Kane actually is. So I'm interested to see if that continues. Obviously, there's the concern, I think, for the Oilers as well, though, has been there hasn't been a lot of jump out of anybody on that team. And I'm including McDavid and Draisaitl in that too. They've not been doing, and you've started to hear the whispers, and I've talked about this a lot in the past. You're starting to hear people in the market, Ryan Rashog's been the big one, going, if this team ever wants to win a cup, you've got to separate McDavid and Draisaitl and have two lines. You can't just put them both on the one line and win a cup. You can do that for the regular season. You can't do that in a playoff run. And I think it might be starting to seep into people in Edmonton that they might need to work something out where Draisaitl plays line two. Like with McDavid out at the moment,
occasionally. I mean, they do that occasionally, but it just doesn't stick long term. The moment that they start to have their scoring dry up, they put them back together again. Like
they panic.
Yeah. And
it's a weird roster. It's a weird roster. They're not great on defense. They've got no depth. Their net minding is atrocious.
Yeah.
And if you don't have McDavid and Draisaitl going absolutely crazy, the points dry up. And teams, I think, are starting to put together, like that whole thing, we talked about it for the playoffs last year. The way to play the Oilers was you soak up as much McDavid and Draisaitl ice time as you can. And the second they leave the ice, you go crazy because you can get at them. And there's also been a lack of push just in general. Like they've had a couple of horrific goals conceded. Mostly their defense trying to play out from behind the net. There was that horrible one the other day with Nurse and Ekholm and Bouchard, and Bouchard's not really skating, and Nurse is not really even looking where he's about to pass the puck to and passes it directly to an attacking player. It's like, I don't know what they're doing. And for all of those people who tried to tell me that the Sharks would be much better than everyone anticipated, no, we're the worst team in hockey. We are the worst team in hockey by a very long distance. San Jose's job is to have an occasional moment and then lose. And that's what we do. We have one moment a game, and it's usually something that William Eklund's done, and it's like, oh, look, William Eklund did something, and we're down. Like today, William Eklund scores the first goal, and everyone goes, San Jose scored against Florida, and they're down 2-1. Okay. That's the point. Like San Jose might try to have the largest tank ever at this point in time, and I don't know who's going to beat us to it. I don't think anyone can beat us to being the worst team in the league. We're not good. The only thing that might hurt us is that McKenzie Blackwood's been good. He set a record the other day for the most franchise saves. It was 51 or 52 saves.
How many games do you think that the Sharks can get through before they win one?
What have we got coming up? So we've got we'll lose to the Lightning, we'll lose to the Hurricanes, we should lose to the Caps, we'll lose to the Canucks, we'll lose to the Penguins, we'll lose to the Flyers, Oilers, Golden Knights. It might be the Ducks on the 13th of November.
It could be.
The Ducks on the 13th of November might be the first chance for San Jose to win one. It's brutal. If they don't win that one, Panthers, Blues, Canucks, Kraken, then the Habs on the 25th.
It could go a while. That's going to be interesting. And look, by then I think we'll have a better picture of what each team is. I think at this point in time, some teams obviously have only played 5 times. Some have played 7 or 8, but for the most part, we tend to kind of take a slice of the season at about the 20 game mark and have
you don't really pay attention until the 20 game
picture of like, okay, now teams are actually kind of looking like what they are. Let's see where everyone stands. So maybe by the next episode we'll have a little bit of a better idea about which of these teams are mirages that have come back to the pack and which ones look like they're legit.
So before we finish up, the last thing I want to sort of get to is I got bored the other day. And it was after the last podcast, and then I commented on a post on the NHL fans page. And one of the most common things that I think both of us hear, I definitely hear it, is that I hate X team. Every time you comment, you just hate us. So I wrote a thing, which was basically called "Why I Hate Your Team." It's there. The link is on the NHL fans page. And I went through every single team and said, I don't hate you, but if I did, I'd have a reason. It wouldn't be for no reason. So, yeah, it was interesting. I was waiting for some pushback, and I got very limited amounts of pushback. I think most people got it.
People only get upset at you about streaming, not
NHL TV.
Not this, apparently.
No, NHL, trying to help them stream television hurts, but this and telling them that their team's terrible apparently is fine. It was really, it was fun to write. I'll give you that. It was really fun to write. There was some of my favorites. The Montreal is probably my favorite thing that I wrote, which was, for those who haven't read it, my Montreal take was, you made the final in the bubble because you were witness to the last miracle of Carey Price and thought it was real. You continue to tell everyone you won the last Canadian Stanley Cup, but that cup is now old enough to vote, drink, have gone through their wild phase, and is now ready to settle down to a quiet family life. That's one of my favorite ones that I put together. But I don't know. Was there anything that was too stinging, or was there anything that you took?
No, look, I think that most of them were pretty pretty fair.
I think the other one I was really savage on was San Jose.
Yeah.
Because you hurt the ones you love.
Yeah, look, obviously, yeah, you've got the most personal insults for your own team, but look, I think most of them were pretty fair, and I think that's probably why you didn't get quite so much pushback on it.
Yeah.
I think that most people can look at that and go, yeah, okay, there's an element of truth to that.
Yeah, I mean, the other one that I really enjoyed, and I think it'll be deeply underrated because not enough people pay attention to what's going on in Nashville, was to put the "I love it, I want it, it's UC Sora's contract" to the goal song, which was, I walked around for the next day, by the way, singing that. All I could hear, whenever, like I'm walking around going, "I love it, I want it, it's UC Sora's contract," and yeah. And then the funny one was, I think Shannon gave me the feedback when I said about Winnipeg. It's miserable, cold, and dark, and that's just the locker room. And he was like, "No, that's fair."
Pretty much.
That's completely fair. But yeah, it was. Look, that was a lot of fun to write. I'm going to start doing a little bit more of that here and there with like putting different written bits up as well. We might start making a bit more use of the site for doing some other articles and stuff like that, and doing other written bits and pieces that don't fit into a podcast format or don't fit into, sort of our ability. Like, it's something that pops up and we're not going to get to talk about it until the next pod, and that's a bit too long. Throwing some stuff up onto there is a bit of a way to sort of get some of that stuff out. So keep your eyes open for that. Obviously, have a read of that article. It's up on the Australian NHL fans Facebook page. Have a bit of a read. Let us know what you think. If you really disagree with it, let us know. I had one bit of pushback, and that was somebody posted a photo of Connor Bedard, which apparently was the answer to me suggesting that I don't like Chicago, and it's got nothing to do with on ice, and it's the off ice stuff.
I mean, look, it might be somewhat meta in that maybe they think that you're upset that you didn't get Connor Bedard, but like that's all that I can think of.
I mean, look, well, the last part of Chicago was, I did say getting Bedard was like the Empire blowing up Endor to end Return of the Jedi, but and it is like blowing up Endor. Like, man, the Wookiees, everyone's there in Endor, and suddenly boom, and that's the end of Return of the Jedi, and you don't get the holograms of everyone nodding and smiling at the end. Instead, you just get Endor blowing up and like every bits of floating, good guy. So, but that'll finish us off for this episode. So hopefully everyone's enjoyed the Frozen Frenzy stuff. At this point in time, the Kraken have equalized, and we're in overtime in Detroit. And Detroit are just pushing, and they missed an open net. So hopefully you get to enjoy the last part of the Frozen Frenzy. We will be back probably with a more regular schedule coming up probably by next week. So look out for that. But we will catch you all later.
See ya.